Hey guys, we are talking today about colonial regions. So our next couple of days, we're going to be over specific parts of the colonies that England was setting up in the Americas. So we're going to talk about each different one throughout this one. So the one that we're going to be talking about today is the New England colonies. So that's going to be our focus for today. So our first thing we're going to talk about is this image right here. So you know what each region is going to be. So you have the New England colonies, you have the middle colonies, and you have the southern colonies. We're going to talk about each one of those. As we go through on this video, we're going to be focusing on the New England colonies themselves. So let's talk about what the New England colonies were. So the New England colonies were Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. So you can see in our image over there on the left that Maine was actually a part of the Massachusetts Bay colony. So you can see the green part up there. That's what eventually becomes Maine later on in history. So these are our main New England colonies. So we're going to talk about kind of what was going on there, why it was happening, the differences that we see in each one. Their characteristics is kind of what we're going to be talking about. So first off, why did people come to these colonies? Okay, what was a big reason why they decided to show up here? The big one for New England colonies, remember we talked about Plymouth and Jamestown, the differences between those two. This is why right here. So Plymouth was what established, Massachusetts Bay Colony, and other colonies branched out for religious freedom. That's why they wanted to be in this area. They were being persecuted over in Europe for their beliefs, and so they decided, hey, let's go somewhere where we can go through and worship the way we want to and all those kind of things there. So religious freedom was the main reason why people came into the New England colonies. They were highly religious people. We talk about Puritans, where they believed in a certain amount of things. You had Anglicans coming over as well, the people that were Church of England. So the big reason why people were coming to the New England colonies was because of religious freedom, be able to worship the way they wanted to worship. Another big part for the New England colonies that we need to understand is education. Because people were very religious at this time, they put a lot of importance into public education. So this is why you see another big difference in the New England colonies being the focus on education and religion. A lot of people wanted to educate the future generations, so they had ministers that could preach and read the Bible and all those things. Come with that, you got to have education system, right? You got to be able to learn how to read and write and deliver those things the way you need to. So education was a big part of the New England colonies. So religious freedom and education. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about a whole lot when we talk about these colonies here. It seems like every time I do a video, there's a bell every time. Next thing we want to talk about is, you ever heard of the college Harvard, our first American university over here? Started in New England, right? So in Boston, Massachusetts is where Harvard is located. 1636 is when John Harvard founded the Harvard College. So this was to get people educated, to have ministers that could preach and spread their religion all over the place. So education was a major role, a theme for these New England colonies. A big thing when we talk about eating and farming, agriculture was still a main form of getting food. However, in New England, the climate did not allow for people to have big, gigantic farms like we see in the southern colonies. Southern colonies had a lot of plantations, grew a whole bunch of different crops, but this in New England did not have that. You had smaller farms. You grew just enough for your for your family, which we call subsistence farming. So that's just enough for your family to live off on. You might be able to sell some things here or there, trade. Maybe you grew more beans and you need some carrots and you can trade with the people that are there. But that's pretty much what would happen. And that was about it. You wouldn't have him being sent over to England or anything like that to give all these goods. Mostly it was made for your family, and that was about it. So subsistence farming was the main role of agriculture in New England, which is the exact opposite of the southern colonies, which hopefully you'll learn about in the southern colony video. Also, why weren't the farming making a profit? Just talk about it. They're just doing it for their family, not having a lot of farming going on. The climate, shorter growing seasons up in New England, which is the very northern part of the United States, modern day United States. So you see that growing seasons are a lot shorter, which means that the crops that you can grow are very limited. So that's why you see not a lot of them using it for profit there. A big part of New England were these town hall meetings. When we talk about democracy, we mentioned last week or earlier about the Mayflower Compact and how that was our first kind of forming of democratic ideals in the colonies. What branched from that were town hall meetings. These were close communities. Remember, they're all there because of religious freedom. They preached and worshiped in the same kind of way, so you saw them really being close together. That being said, there were still problems in these colonies, in these towns. So to settle these disputes, you couldn't wait for the king or anyone to send something all the way down to England and then get the decree back over here, what you wanted to have happen, right? So you had to figure out a way to solve these problems. So what happens was they would have these town meetings where everyone in the town would gather together and kind of settle their disputes, talk about, hey, this is how I feel about this, and someone else would come up and say, well, that's how I feel about this, and then all would come together and decide what they think is best for the community. That is the purest form of democracy, right? So everyone's voice is being heard in these meetings. They come to an agreement. It might not be the agreement that some people agree upon, but everyone voiced their opinions, and the majority was the decision that was made. So whoever the majority was, that was the decision made. Everyone can go home somewhat happy about that, right? All these meetings happen in church buildings. Some of the biggest buildings in these towns were churches, so that's the biggest place where you can congregate and talk and solve these problems. Town hall meetings are a crucial part of the United States the further we get into U.S. history, especially when we start talking about the Revolutionary War, leading up to that war. We talk about, even further in history, civil rights activists, right, and how they met in churches and all those kind of things. That was a big part of democracy, and it's still seen today. Town hall meetings might not happen in churches now, but you still have a lot of places. Let's say, for example, I've used this before in the past. Franklin wanted a aquatic center, right? And you had to decide they're going to do it. They held a town hall meeting where if you wanted to voice your opinion, you could come in, voice your opinion to the people that are planning it, and they can take that information and decide if it's going to happen or not. So these town hall meetings still exist. They're still a big part of New England communities, the states up there, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont. That's how they vote. We have the election coming up here soon. We had primaries previously. The primaries, people just get together and we call it a caucus, and they start throwing stuff out and everyone's together. That's a town hall meeting. So town hall meetings are a big part of the rest of democracy and U.S. history from there on. So this is a big part of what we see in New England, kind of influencing a lot of those things throughout the other states. You also have this thing called a Puritan theocracy. There we go. If you remember back in 6th grade, which if you have me, we talked a lot about theocracy. Theocracy is a government based on religion. That can be a bunch of different things. We've talked about the Middle East where they use Sharia law. The people that practice Islam, they use that. Same thing here with the Puritans. The church was the one that governed the people there. Remember, England is so far away that they really don't even care about what's going on there at the moment. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. So they're not really trying to govern that as much as they can. So what Puritans do, they're very religious people. So what do they use? They use the Bible and the church to govern the people in these towns. So what you would have is that the government would be your church elders and the people that ran the church. They would decide what was happening, those actions like that. There were still town hall meetings. Remember, that was still a big part of it. They were kind of the kind of ones that made the ship go where it needed to go, right? Then any punishments that would happen to these people because they broke any laws, anything like that would come from the Bible, right? And so you see a lot of things where we look at and we're just like, why in the world would they do something like that? That's because in the Bible, that's what it said. So they're using that to govern and punish people for breaking the laws there. All right, so that is the New England colonies. So make sure you focus on this video. Think about the differences that we have in New England. So the big things that we need to know about New England: Number one, why they came here was because of religious freedom. A lot of your New England colonies, that's where they decided to branch out for religious freedom. Two, education was important to these New England colonies. They wanted these ministers to be educated, learn how to read, learn how to write, all those things. In order to do that, you have to have education. That's where you start having schools founded. Harvard University, that we know is the first American university, it was in Boston, Massachusetts, was for that purpose. So education was a key thing there. Also, town hall meetings, we kind of put a big emphasis on that. Town hall meetings was where people could express their opinions about things, could talk about it. That's a democratic process that we still use today. And then theocracy was a big part of these New England colonies, where the religion was the things that governed those towns and those colonies. All right, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys later. See you.